Well, let's jump right in. Hello again, everyone. My name is Mat Soltis. I'm the Vice President of Cloud Customer Engagement here at Qumulo. And I have the pleasure today of chatting with and being joined virtually by Janine Corey, our Qumulo Cloud CTO. Before joining Qumulo, Janine was a leader at AWS in a large program called Experience-Based Accelerator. This is a pretty cool program that helped customers accelerate their migration and adoption of the cloud using very specific customer and workload measurable dynamics. Things like making apps more agile, making the cloud more scalable, shutting down data centers and moving specific workloads into the cloud. Janine has a vast bit of experience in genomics, manufacturing, and financial services cloud migrations. And I mentioned that just as we kicked off to say that these are the kind of conversations, cloud migration, strategy, big drivers that Janine and I love having with customers. For this session today, we're going to address some of the frequent questions that our Qumulo customers and other customers we've seen doing cloud migrations have. Questions about cloud file data services, some best practices around data migration, cloud adoption, and using the power of AWS to drive customer outcomes. We'll also have a demonstration of Qumulo running in the cloud, some of the value props, and actually how it works in real time on AWS by Daniel Models, our Senior Product Manager from here at Qumulo. So let's jump right into the discussion. Janine, we're here today to talk about file data services in the cloud. And why don't we start with the first question? Based on some recent ESG research, the stats for the industry are about 86% of organizations are currently using some type of public cloud data to public cloud service to store data in the cloud. 65% of those customers are using the cloud for file. Janine, you speak to customers all the time. Can you tell us what and how organizations are leveraging the cloud for file data?
Yeah, Matt. That's a really fun conversation to have, actually. One of the things that I saw a lot with customers was that moving data to the cloud is often their starting point. So there's a lot of customers out there who see cloud as a way to move their data from out of their data centers, clear up a bunch of space, and sort of store and archive or back up that data to the cloud. The unfortunate part about that is that there's quite a few customers that don't really go beyond that. And there's so much that could be done with unstructured data and file data in the cloud, given that in the cloud, you have access to burstable amounts of very high performance compute that you can run against your file data. For a lot of customers, their file data is the core business value that they produce. A genomics company that has genomics sequenced and large volumes of gene data, that's what their services are built on. That's what they do analytics on. That's how they provide value to healthcare, to diagnostics, to disease prevention. And so when they move that data to the cloud, they're then able to purchase at short burstable periods of time or spot instances to run analytics against that data in ways that produce huge amounts of value for them. So I sort of hate to see the fact that many customers move data to the cloud and then don't figure out how to use the cloud ecosystem in the ways in which it's really good at delivering more value to customers. I will say that with some of the customers I worked in the EBA program, what we saw is customers that were looking at solving business problems through the cloud. And if a customer's business problem was, I have all this data in the cloud, how do I monetize it? How do I run new modern apps against it? How do I create subscription services for customers that allow me to use that data in new and different ways? Those are fun challenges to solve because the cloud gives you all the things you need to solve those problems. And that's what I really love to see when customers are moving their file data to the cloud, is really using the cloud ecosystem and being able to scale their data out, being able to get metadata against it, running machine learning algorithms against it, and really figuring out how to monetize it and create whole new revenue sources for themselves.
So running parallel to that theme, Janine, in our recent research, customers tell us again and again, they want to go to the cloud, but we hear about 40%, 41% of teams telling us that data migration into the cloud is a challenge. Over a third of our customers say that actually, data management is one of their biggest challenges. So based on what you've seen, Janine, can you share a little bit about what organizations should look for to address data management and data migration challenges?
Yeah, so again, it's another really interesting question. What I've seen is that sometimes customers will sit on applications and hold them on-prem if they are dependent on file data. Mainly because file data often is one of those places where multiple applications tap into the same resource pool of file data. And customers often don't know how to disentangle that. And they're concerned about the time it might take to refactor or re-architect those applications, to move it to a cloud solution that might be single protocol, right? And if you have a single protocol cloud solution, then you can't have all of your applications work against that file data unless you re-architect them to use that single file protocol. So I've seen some customers that defer that kind of a migration to later in their planning, and they'll move, say, modern apps first, because modern apps are ones they think, okay, that's all cloud compatible to begin with. But the legacy apps or multi-protocol access apps are not going to work. Well, some of the challenges that customers face are really, how do I solve those kinds of problems? And it looks sticky to them. It looks complicated to them. And what I would say to them is don't look at your costs and challenges as just being financial costs. Some of your costs are time, training, wear and tear on your internal people who may be putting a lot of time into refactoring legacy apps, which is really not where your core business value is coming from when you move to the cloud. So one of my suggestions is to figure out how you can use third-party products like Qumulo that allow multi-protocol access, that work in the same way on-prem and in the cloud, so that you can train once, deploy anywhere, and you can tap, maybe you decided to leave your legacy apps on-prem. Well, those can still access your file data lake that spans across your hybrid cloud infrastructure. It can reside both on-prem and in the cloud. And your new modern apps that you're building in the cloud can also tap into that same file data pool. So whenever you can simplify that problem for yourself and spare your team from wear and tear, you should do that. And that was one of the reasons I find Qumulo's solution so compelling when I think about it from the customer's perspective, is often customers want to simplify the pieces that they can simplify, because there are other pieces that can't be simplified. And so they should really be saving their energy, their time, their partner time, and perhaps that extra complexity that you might have to have your teams dive into. Use that on what's necessary and pull in third-party products like Qumulo that can help you with the things that decomplexify the entire process.
Excellent.
So Matt, I want to ask you a question or two. So I know you talk to Qumulo customers a lot. What do you think that there are some customers and some industries for whom Qumulo is just a better fit than others? Like, what are the characteristics of those customers that you've seen?
Yeah, there's two themes. Janine, you actually hit on one of them, this ability to move workloads into the cloud without having to rewrite their apps. That's really key for a lot of industries. And I want to give a couple industry examples of that. And the second one runs parallel to that, is really getting business outcomes faster. So if you think of different industries, we have medical records organizations with really big PACS solutions. You think of all of those massive X-rays and CAT scans, all the different medical imaging. That volume of imaging alone is a burden on-prem. As it goes to the cloud, using the cloud at scale really can help them store those backends. Think about media and entertainment. It's always been a strong point for Qumulo. When content creators are now creating in 4K or even now 8K, the massive amount of files involved in that, and they need to manage, analyze, and run that in the cloud. Some other industry applications like GIS or LiDAR, stitching together lots of images. A great one that I love that we have a number of Qumulo customers doing in the cloud is genomic sequencing. Customers, running in AWS using Qumulo, things like the Broad Institute's GACT or Dragon, those FastQ file sequencers, and they write, as you just said, Janine, they write native, a native file from the back end. Not having to rewrite those apps and being able to move them right into the cloud is a huge advantage for these organizations. So that's a scenario where the industry app is driving the move to the cloud, and they want to take those apps over with them without having to rewrite. Cloud Object is great, blob storage is great, but eventual consistency doesn't always meet the real-time read-write kind of high-performance file data that these apps need. There's an inverse of this that we're also hearing from industry. And this is sort of the opposite side of the equation. Some organizations and some customers, as they move to the cloud, they actually want to set up a cloud file data lake first. And they want to set up their data architecture in the cloud that they're going to build their apps around. So we have a pharmaceutical firm that's setting up a massive data lake, Hadoop, Spark, EMR, AWS Lake Formation, and using Qumulo for their high performance file data. And in that kind of model, they set up the data lake first for pharmaceutical drug research, 40 petabytes plus of data. And then they bring the apps sort of to go around it. The nice thing in both those scenarios is Qumulo can support both use cases in both models.
Yeah, that's interesting. And, in healthcare and in medical imaging, that's another place where that whole multi-protocol access point is so critical, because you'll notice that some of the genomic sequencing machines might have one kind of operating system that uses one form of protocols to access that data. And then perhaps the analytics machines use a different, they might be Linux machines that are running some high scale analytics against them to maybe do diagnostics or best practices in detection or pathology detection. And then as that content's being distributed out, you can think of all of the maybe Microsoft workstations that are running perhaps custom software that's just built for the hospitals. And then they may also need to see those images in order to talk to patients. So that's another circumstance in which that multi-protocol access to the same data, where you want that data integrity and you want that data protection because it's super important data, but you want it to be accessible for all the different kinds of use cases that you want. And you don't want to silo that data. You don't want to have multiple copies of that so that the hospital systems can access it and the sequencers can access it, or the imaging or pathology or PAC systems can access it and do the work on it that needs to be done.
Yeah, Janine, there's one more part of that use case that you're talking about that we've seen with customers. We actually developed a feature called Shift so that customers run the genomic sequence, or sequencers talk SMB or NFS. The job is done. They want to collaborate with another university, or they want to share that data globally. And we have a capability to move that data right out of Qumulo, either on-prem or in the cloud, into S3 in native format. Then they could put that data into a data pipeline. They could share it globally. They can archive it to Glacier when those large data sets are done, or even connect other cloud services like Rekognition, SageMaker right into that data on S3. And we believe pretty passionately on the Qumulo side that customers own their data. They should be able to move it and use it wherever they want and whatever kind of technologies that works best for the use case.
That is such an efficient way to do things. That's one of the sort of newer offerings that Qumulo has that I'm just so excited about, because I can think about so many industries for whom the format in which you want to keep it in order to run all those analytics and in order to do that really fast update and modify is different than your final result. When you get to that final result, being able to publish it in S3 is such a nice low-cost alternative and so great for content distribution and accessibility if you decide to make your final results of something public. But you need something in super high-performant, fast file systems in order to run the analytics that you want to do on it when it's actively being processed. So that's such an exciting piece of the Qumulo value proposition, I think. So when you see customers starting to migrate their apps or starting to move their workloads to the cloud, what do you see as being one of the most successful things that they do? What are some of the best practices that you see in those customers' planning and execution of their migrations?
Yeah, Janine, that's a great question, because what we talk about with customers and what I've seen from some successful ones again and again is they're asking themselves some really interesting questions about cloud migrations, about what services to use, about what business models. And not only are the technical folks that we're really good at asking really geeky, high performance technical questions, the folks running the apps are also asking cross-business questions to the business, finance, operations, security teams. Questions like this, what parts of this solution, we're talking about genomics or maybe a GIS solution, what part of the solution do I actually need to keep on-prem because of performance or speed or legacy processing? What can I do faster, better in the cloud based on economies of size and scale, using a SaaS service or using an AWS service or an ISV like Qumulo? I think maybe a second question here is what kind of industry use cases or references can I leverage? Qumulo has a number of these, as do other providers. AWS has a great set of reference architectures for anomaly detection or aerial imaging or medical imaging. Those use cases can really get you a jump start on the solution. And the last one is reference architectures for cloud data lakes or for high performance solutions. Again, we have several of these. And Janine, actually, let me flip this last question back to you, this last sort of model. Reference architectures are really important. I know you have a lot of passion here. Can you give us maybe some thoughts or some ways customers should be thinking about hybrid models for cloud storage environments and reference architectures for unstructured data?
The interesting thing is that there's a lot of customers who put together a plan to go all in on cloud. But I don't really believe there is ever such a thing as all in on cloud. It takes most customers anywhere from 12 to 48 months to move all of their workloads into a cloud. Some of them actually decide at the end, maybe there's limited value left in moving this last 20% of what I have. Maybe the cost of keeping 1 or 2 data centers running with this legacy workload in there is okay for me. And you also see customers starting to do sort of the opposite. Maybe they finished moving their workloads to the cloud, and then they decide that they want to get Outposts, or they want to get Azure Stack, or they want to get something that's close to the edge for content distribution and low latency as they take the product of all of that new modern computing they're doing in the cloud, and they want to distribute it to geos or cities. A good use case for that is autonomous vehicles, right? They may be running all of their compute for their machine learning models by pushing everything up to the cloud and running their analytics there. But often those algorithms for how those autonomous vehicles behave, they want to push that back to a city center so that it's very low latency in terms of how it's feeding those autonomous vehicles. So in that case, are they really all in on cloud? Kind of, except all of the edge locations, which again, they could run on different kinds of hardware infrastructure. And a lot of companies also have a constant acquisition model. And so if you have a constant acquisition model, you may have swept up your last data center, and then you buy 2 or 3 more companies that perhaps are still on-prem. Maybe they're on-prem and their cloud footprint is in a different cloud than the one of the acquiring company. So my feeling is that as a plan for how you're going to do your cloud adoption is to always plan as if You're going to have edge locations. You may have acquisitions which are not in the cloud that you're in and may not be in the cloud at all. So finding ways to train once, deploy anywhere, build once, deploy anywhere, and be able to have visibility across all of those environments with the tools that you select. It's one of the reasons why Terraform scripting for automation and Kubernetes as a containerization strategy has been really popular with customers, because it does allow them to continue to deploy on-prem if that's what ends up being the most efficient and practical solution for them, or being able to deploy in one cloud or another cloud, right? Depending on maybe the presence in a particular country or a particular geography that they're looking at deploying into. So I really like the idea of going into the cloud, because I think that the cloud offers customers a value proposition that is just financially completely not doable on-prem. And if you think about your cloud future, think about it in a flexible way. Think about it in a way that says, I'm not sure that I'll ever completely get there, because my company itself is constantly growing and constantly changing and constantly acquiring or getting acquired or merging. And in those circumstances, I need to build an infrastructure framework that allows me to encompass that in the ways in which I manage my data, and I manage my data infrastructure, and I manage my modernization. It could also be backwards compatible to legacy systems that I may only support for 12 to 24 or 36 months while I'm incorporating a new company I acquired. But all of those are really important factors as you think about a company's future.
Excellent, Janine. Mike, right now may be a good place to actually show a demo. So if you're watching, please ask some questions in the question queue. We'll get to those after the demo. But I think seeing Qumulo run live, we're fortunate to have Daniel Models with us. I think as you look at this demo, you can also queue up some questions on how Qumulo does some of the functions behind the scenes. Daniel, why don't you take a couple minutes and walk us through both the console functionality and maybe some of the performance features of Qumulo?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I appreciate you taking the time and explaining kind of the value of Qumulo and what an amazing product we are. So as Matt explained, I want to kind of start maybe just with the deployment experience, just to show how easy it is to get Qumulo up and running and how fast it is using either CloudFormation or Terraform. Then maybe also look at a little walkthrough of our UI, all the performance features we have, and all the telemetry and analytics that are built into our system. And then finally kind of show you kind of the integrations we have with AWS, which really allow you to unlock the power of the public cloud. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and make sure I have the right window. All right. Panelists, are we looking good on the screen share? Great.
Good.
So, just to get you started really quickly, I'm just going to use the AWS Marketplace. That's one option for where you can find our product in a self-service manner. Obviously, you can also get CloudFormation templates by talking to our cloud specialists in Qumulo Sales. So I'm just going to go ahead and just pick one of these small guys here, just to test out and show you how easy it is to get started. We do support Terraform and CloudFormation as a deployment option. Those are both infrastructure as code tools that make it really easy to get started. But for simplicity's sake, and I think it's also kind of a nicer, cleaner experience, especially if it's your first time and you're new to the cloud, I'm going to use CloudFormation. And so you would normally go ahead, and if you're not subscribed already, you would click continue to subscribe on the marketplace. If you're new to the marketplace, that basically allows you access to our Amazon Machine Image, or AMI, which contains our software. So once you click the subscribe button, you will then be able to launch EC2 instances running our software. And then once you do that, you could just kind of scroll down here and find all the CloudFormation templates that are listed on all of our listings. All of our listings have CloudFormation templates, which make it easier to get up and running quickly. So the quick way I do to get to the CloudFormation template is I just click this View CloudFormation template link, scroll down. There's a Download CloudFormation template button. I'm just going to go ahead and right click that and copy the address because it's actually hosted on S3 by Amazon already for you. And that's a requirement for launching a template from CloudFormation. I'm going to just go over here to CloudFormation and the Create Stack window and just drop that link right in. And then click Next. And so the first thing I'm going to do is just give it, a quick stack name so I can refer to the stack later when I'm looking at my list of CloudFormation stacks. You can kind of think of that as like an environment name, just something to be able to get back to it later, especially if you are just evaling and you want to tear down the cluster later. Instance type, we show you all the instance types that you're allowed to launch with. I'm just going to leave it on M5 4X large. That's fine for most cases. This is your SSH key pair, which allows you to SSH and get administrative access to the software if you need to. If you want to encrypt your volumes, by default, all our CloudFormation templates will encrypt using EBS encryption, all the data volumes. So all the data is encrypted at rest. I'm going to leave this blank. So what that means is that by default, we're just going to use the AWS default encryption key. We're not going to specify our own. And then, it's going to have to live in a network somewhere so we can reach it. So I'm just going to put it into a network for deployment. I'm going to pick the subnet. I'll just do this one. And then I'll just give it a name. This is kind of the name, your SMB NetBIOS name, your Microsoft Active Directory name that you want to give the cluster. So I'm just going to call it Qumulo for simplicity. And you can add an SNS topic if you want to be notified of any AWS automated instance recovery actions that take place. So I'm going to go ahead and click Next. Usually I leave the defaults, everything is default on the next page on the CloudFormation, although you can add tags, especially if they're required by your organization for cost tracking or any sort of management or information about who owns what in an account. Go ahead and click Next. Just go by this review screen, make sure everything looks good, and just go ahead and click Create Stack. And now CloudFormation will just go ahead and spin up all the resources required to run our solution in the cloud. And this will be done in about 5 to 10 minutes. And when it's done, the information to actually access the cluster will appear here in the Outputs tab of CloudFormation. So I'm going to kind of do a baking show thing and fast forward to 5 minutes in the future from now, where the cluster has already deployed and it's now running successfully in the cloud, happily chugging along. As you can see, this cluster is quite a bit bigger than the 4-node of 600 gigabyte cluster that I just launched. This is a 200 terabyte cluster. We can go up to multiple petabytes in size. So we really can handle those large data lake applications that you might need. And this is actually a cluster backed by the AWS EBS SC1 volumes. So those are very, very cost effective, actually cheaper per gigabyte per month than S3. And they really allow you to get to a really large scale in kind of a cost-effective fashion. But as you can see here from our telemetry, we're still able to push. Here looks like an aggregate around 8 gigs a second of throughput. Even on these, a cluster that's spec'd with an SC1. And right now I'm doing a workload that's pretty heavy intensive on writes. So it's going a bit slower on aggregate throughput here, but it's still doing pretty well considering there's about hundreds of gigahertz of CPU blasting this right now with as much work as it can give it. So just to keep the cluster really busy and really keep the load really high. You can see, you've got your main stats right here about your capacity, including a breakdown of metadata and snapshots, how much that's using. It's also kind of interesting. You can see, how fast, how many files are being created per minute, how many directories are being created per minute. You can see kind of your read and write throughput distribution over time. And you can even see how all of your nodes in your cluster, how the clients are balanced across them. This can really help in, figuring out why is my performance not as high as I thought it would be. A typical reason is just because all the clients are pointing at one node instead of being distributed evenly. Going into some of our more cool analytics features that I really like, you can see live all the clients talking to your cluster, and you can see kind of the top 20 by throughput, by IOPS, and you can even expand these and see like which files they're actually touching. And on top of that, you can switch over to see the path view to see which files in your system are the hottest and are getting the most activity. another thing that I really like about this is kind of this capacity explorer view. If you've ever been like, where's all my space? How come I've run out of space already? Who's using all this capacity? And you've run DU on your file system and it's taken ages to crawl the file system and figure out, show you which directories have the most capacity being used. Well, we actually built that live into our file system, a real-time view of like how the capacity is being used by directory. So it really lets you dig in really quickly to figure out, okay, this directory has, somewhere around 20 terabytes of data used. Well, what files are the biggest? And it really lets you narrow in and on what parts of your file system are using the most capacity at a given time. We also have another bunch of cool views. This integrated analytics kind of gives you a mixture of capacity as well as also performance mixed together in the single one. So if I say highlight a directory, I can see, okay, the top activity by path in this directory are these files. The top client that's accessing them is this client. I can double click on this directory and zoom in a little bit, and then it has to go query for that information, but then it'll show me all the subdirectories, and then within those subdirectories, all the files that are being accessed. So it really lets me like dig through my file system and see which parts of it are hot, which parts of it are cold, where is all the data, what parts can I maybe like move to a colder tier, that sort of thing. Going through other features, you've got your NFS and SMB. We are multi-protocol by default. You can connect both of them up to us. It works seamlessly. Permissions works fine coming across NFS and SMB together. We also have quotas. If you're sharing the system across multiple use cases, you can restrict capacity growth by directory. And there's just a slew of other different options. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I just wanted to kind of show you that we have a lot of enterprise features, including Active Directory integration. So there's a lot. We are enterprise ready file system. Another thing that might be interesting that is over time, you can also see your capacity trends, which I think is also very helpful for exploring those. Let me show you guys this. Exploring those cases where you're wondering where capacity had changed rapidly over time. We maintain kind of a historical record of capacity changes. And so you can see here on this cluster, for example, approximately 1.4 terabytes disappeared. And you can be like, well, why did that happen? I can actually click this capacity change button and it'll show me which directories that change happened in. And this is just all built in the system. It happens automatically, and it really doesn't impact performance. It all happens kind of asynchronously in the background. So this is just like really nice. Nothing, you don't have to run any sort of tools to get this information. It's live. It's built into the UI. Switching over to maybe talking about a little bit about how our platform integrates with AWS. We've got integration with Cloudwatch Metrics, so we can get information from the cluster into Cloudwatch Metrics, and you can put it in a dashboard like I'm showing you guys here, as well as you can put these metrics alongside AWS exported metrics about your EBS volumes, about your instances, and that allows you to really kind of dig in and figure out, well, how come my performance isn't going right, and that sort of thing. Auditing is very important to major organizations for compliance reasons, and so we support exporting audit logs to syslog compatible endpoints. We also support exporting them to Cloudwatch logs, like I'm showing you guys here. And so you can get these logs with all these JSON records of every single file access that's happened on your system, which is then queryable through Cloudwatch logs. You can also hook up Lambdas to these Cloudwatch log streams and actually have events fire based on activity that happens on your file system real time. Another thing that's great about being an enterprise file system is that you can just rip one of these drives out right underneath it. We're designed to be in a data center that's very fault tolerant. So I'm just going to pull a drive right out of the system as it's running. And if I go back, it's probably going to start complaining about how, a drive is just missing, and it automatically detects it and it starts reprotecting that data. But notice that I'm still able to access the files. I'm not losing any sort of performance. The system's still up. I can still read and write data, even though I just pulled a drive out. The system's able to deal with that automatically. And then finally, Matt kind of touched on this before. We have a capability to shift data to S3, which is really powerful. And so, I have here an S3 bucket that I've created for this demo. And I can go to our dashboard here, and I can create a copy to S3 relationship. And I have that same bucket name here. And I'm going to put a prefix in front of everything I copy. I'm going to copy the whole file system. We'll just copy everything. We'll see how it goes. And I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to put a prefix in front of everything called reInvent 2020 demo copy. And then here's obviously access key and secret key. Note that you can also run this from on-premises, so you don't actually have to run this only from AWS. But this is a great feature to help leverage the power of the cloud. Go ahead and click Create Copy. And it should be going ahead and running right now. It's going to take a second to load. And I should also mention, we also have automatic disk replace. So what just happened here in the background while I was showing the S3 copy feature is the disk that I pulled out got replaced automatically by our disk failure detection system. So I didn't even have to do anything. Once I pulled a disk out, something noticed it and fixed the problem automatically. And so right now the data is copying, so I can see the details. I can see how long it's going to take. I can see how much data it's going to copy, how many files, etc. And so that's really I gave you a really quick run through of like pretty much a lot of features in our system. There's a lot more to unpack. I'm going to throw it back over to you, Matt and Janine, for you to kind of wrap us up here. So thank you.
Daniel, thanks. We did get a couple good questions during during your demo. One of the questions is, does Qumulo's cloud-based monitoring that they offer for customers on-prem also exist in the cloud services? Or do you have to use Cloudwatch?
No, we still have the same cloud-based monitoring and support that we do on-prem in the cloud. Excellent.
So Daniel, you were showing the console. I know we have a full functional CLI. We have a native REST API that are available with all of our products, irrespective of where you run them. And then I think also Janine and Daniel, we have a GitHub repo that contains a lot of the scripts and templates, some code samples, Terraform, CloudFormation. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. We also have the we have the ability to generate CloudFormation templates for any capacity that you might need, any cluster. I would definitely recommend talking to one of our cloud specialists to get help with that, because there is some math you need to know about getting the capacity right. But yes, we could pretty much do any capacity, performance, cost mix that you need.
Excellent stuff, Daniel. Thank you. So a couple wrap-up thoughts. One, we specifically make Qumulo available right out of AWS Marketplace or off Qumulo.com if you want to do a free trial. Test it yourself. Demo the environment, scale it up, run it through its paces. You can do that without us. We'd also love the conversation or opportunity to talk to you, as Daniel was alluding to, about architectures, best practices, some reference models. Janine and I talked about some use cases. They're available on the Qumulo website, our Cinesite case study, the Industrial Brothers case study, maybe the Fuse FX case study, about how different organizations are using Qumulo in the cloud. Welcome a dialogue on those as well. Janine or one of the architects on her team would also love to chat with you about your own migration, best practices for data lakes in the cloud. And then lastly, of course, please visit our reInvent sponsor page, where you can discover more about our solutions and some additional Qumulo videos, as well as some upcoming seminars and executive briefings we have scheduled. Well, I want to thank you for your time today. Reach out to us at Qumulo.com or via the communication channels here. We'd love to talk to you about how Qumulo can accelerate your cloud migrations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great chatting with you, Matt, as always.
Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.